Welcome to the Shepherd's Rest Doc Talk. This is episode 192B.
I'm Cam, this is Jilly.
Yes, this is the Acts portion of the Doc Talks. And we are moving through Acts, following the Chronicles of the Apostles, seeing what they're up to after the death, burial, and resurrection of Yeshua. And we have come to Acts 21. And today we're going to talk about Acts 21, 1 through 14. A little recap of where we just came from. In the last episode, that was in 20, we talked about Paul was traveling through Asia and different areas, gathering a collection to take back to Jerusalem. And because of different things happening, he didn't get there at Passover like he was hoping. So we're going to see how they are going through counting the Omer. Okay. Is what they're doing now. And he's going to get there for Shavuot.
Awesome.
And so the end of 20, he was talking to the leaders of Ephesus.
Okay.
If you remember, he was saying, one of the saddest things he said was, "You'll see my face no more."
Yeah.
Almost like he was prophesying. And I say that because that was kind of the first prophetic thing he said as to what's about to happen to him in Jerusalem. Now, whether or not he does see them or not, it's unclear. Some people say no, he was able to get back over there. Some people say no, that was the last time. But Paul at this time thought, this is the last time you're going to see me.
Right.
I'm about to go to Jerusalem and bad things are afoot.
Right. And maybe it's just the last time they saw him there. They may have seen him somewhere else.
That is absolutely true, because these people moved around a lot.
Yeah, they did.
We're going to encounter
big vacation people.
We're going to encounter one of those people in just a few minutes. So we're going to start with 21:1, and it said, "And it came to be when we had torn ourselves away from them and had set sail, we ran a straight course and came to Kos, and the next day to Rhodes, and from there to Patara." All right, so I just want to stop right there and give you just a couple of cool things about these places.
Okay.
All right, so Kos was a place that Herod the Great, let me back up and say this. All of the places are significant to Herod the Great.
Okay.
Now, remember we talked a few weeks ago about how because Herod the Great was so financially backing of the different temples and the different pagan things, that it gave a good Jewish presence. And so when Paul went to these places, he had an audience.
Right.
All right, so Kos is one of those places, and Herod the Great was a financial patron of the athletes at Kos. And the Jewish community of Asia had once used the treasuries at Kos for a depository. So it had a very large Jewish presence and Jewish community. So when he arrived, he had places to lodge, places to stay, and people to witness to about Yeshua. And then Rhodes is kind of interesting. So in 31 BC, after Augustus overcame Antony and completely changed the dynamics of the Roman Empire, Herod the Great was very new to the office. And so he hurried and ran to Rhodes. Not ran, but
he did probably,
yes, took a ship. But he hurried himself to Rhodes and met up with Augustus and pled his allegiance to him.
Okay.
So Augustus gave him a diadem, and then he was in good standing with him, and then he gave them several talents of silver to rebuild their fleet, because it was a big war. This was like the biggest Roman war that up to that time had happened. Also was helped them rebuild the Apollo's great and illustrious temple. So there you go again. He was financing the pagan gods to make a good name, to get in good standing, so he can keep his position. Because let's be honest, while he made this great presence of the palace and of the temple on the Temple Mount, expanded the Temple Mount and whatnot, and really redid the temple, I guess you could say. Made some upgrades.
Facelift.
Yes, gave it a big facelift. But to him, it was just another way of being in good standing with those people.
Right.
Because he really wasn't Jewish anyway.
He was a yes man or please man, keep everyone happy, so that they don't have an et tu brute thing happen where they're going kill them, right?
Right.
Keep everybody happy.
All right, and then Patara, I don't really have anything grand to say about that city. It was just a very large port city, and it's where they boarded a cargo ship. So up to this point, they're in one of those smaller boats that just kind of had to hug the coast, which is why they kept going into these different cities.
Okay.
Now they're boarded a large cargo ship that can go out into the Mediterranean, and their next stop is Zor or Tyre.
Okay.
All right. Wanted to say Tyre because that's what most Bibles say.
Yes.
Mine said Zor, so that's what I will be reading. All right, so let's keep reading in 2. It says, and having found a ship passing over to Phoenicia, we went aboard and set sail. And having sighted Cyprus and having passed it on the left, we sailed to Syria and landed in Zor, for the ship was to unload her cargo there. And having found top ones, we remained there 7 days. So that's about the time. It could be up to 2 weeks that it takes to unload these cargo ships. Then you get back on them and then continue on.
Okay.
So, but they remained 7 days. And here is the first, or maybe the second prophecy. It says, and they told Paul through the Spirit not to go to Jerusalem. And when it came to be that our days there were ended, we left and went on, and all them accompanying us with wives and children till we were out of the city, and kneeling down on the beach we prayed, and having embraced one another we boarded the ship, and they returned to their homes. And when we had completed our voyage from Zor, we came to Ptolemais, and having greeted the brothers, we stayed with them 1 day. And on the next day we left and came to Caesarea. Now we all know about Caesarea.
Right.
Caesarea.
Been there, done that.
Yes. Caesarea was a great port city that was just above
Tel Aviv.
Yeah, Tel Aviv,
just
Joppa.
north of Tel Aviv.
Yeah, well, Joppa.
So Joppa would have
Tel
been.
Aviv wasn't there,
Right,
but
so
today it's above Tel Aviv.
Right.
So,
So
you
Joppa
have
was a big
Joppa,
port,
and
then
Caesarea was this grand
Yes.
thing that also King Herod, right,
Yes.
had a big hand in. He
yeah,
had a
because
house
Joppa
there.
was considered the port of Solomon,
Uh-huh.
and then Herod made.
The port grand.
Made.
How many times can we use the word grand?
Made Caesarea put to shame Joppa.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then that became the big port.
Yes. And went into the house of Philip the evangelist, who was one of the 7, and stayed with him. Now, we remember Philip from Acts 6, and the reason it says he was one of the 7 is because the Hellenistic Jews were complaining that the widows and orphans weren't being
Right.
taken care of, right? So they appointed 7 men to overlook and make sure this was happening.
Right.
And Philip was one of them. So that's why it says he was one of the 7. Now, this was a couple of decades earlier. Okay. This was in the beginning of the disciples' ministries. So,
Right.
So here, Philip, who was by himself at that time, is now married and has 4 daughters that are prophesying. And these 4 daughters are considered replicable prophets. And they didn't consider 10, 8, 7, 5-year-olds replicable prophets.
So you know they're
so you
older.
know that they're in their late teens, early 20s. Right. So that tells us, just how much time has passed. And I think it's interesting that he calls them virgins. So he says, let's see. Okay, it says he's in the house of Philip the evangelist, who was one of the 7, and stayed with him. Now this one had 4 maiden daughters who prophesied. All right, so a lot of Bibles say virgin daughters. Maidens is just another way of saying virgins at that time. And it was believed in the Jewish community, as much as I don't want to think this, that if you had the gift of prophecy, that you should remain celibate. It was believed that in the first century. And all the research I've done says the same thing. It doesn't mean that was a godly command.
No, it just means that was practice.
That was common practice, and it was a common belief. And it made me go, oh my gosh, could
now
this
we know where
explain
that comes
a
from,
lot?
Catholicism.
Well, yes, but also Paul. Paul makes references to remain like me, unmarried, so you can.
And there are thoughts that
be
he
more
was
effective.
actually widowed.
Yes, there are.
But
there's
regardless, once he once he had the experience with Messiah and was filled with the Holy Spirit, at that point, new creation, he remained pure.
So
Yeah, celibate.
Right.
Thank you. I was like, I couldn't remember.
All right,
Think of the
so
word.
it is believed that when females, it is believed that the most pure and holy time is right up until they have their first encounter with a man. Yes.
Well, think about whose name I can't say. The guy who comes out and says, the first thing that comes out to me, it starts with, is it Jeff Assad or whatever?
Yes.
Okay, so his daughter was being dedicated and she went and wept her virginity
Yes.
because she was going to have to remain a virgin.
Yeah. So we know that once you have intercourse,
Yeah.
that you are unclean. So the first time a woman has it, that's not the first time she's unclean, but it's the first time that she's doing a duty to her husband that is at the same time making her unclean. Therefore, you have this, not contrast, but you have this.
Oxymoron?
No, it's
I know, there's a big word for it.
Yes, it's like a conflict of interest.
Yes.
Right?
That word's right here, the other word.
Anyway, yes, but we'll just say conflict of interest because that's what it is. You want to be stay ritually
Right,
pure.
right.
And the more pure you are, the more effective you are at
Right.
prophesying, at doing the things that you need to do.
But then the other side is also keeping the commandment of be fruitful and multiply.
Exactly. That's why it's so important to know your calling and do what you're
Ooh.
called to do.
Yeah.
You know what
that's
I
true.
mean?
Yeah.
We can't all be celibate because then there'd be no one left.
No, but you
Right?
know, I find this very interesting and not a verse you ever hear discussed. That you have was it all four women?
All four.
All four women. I'm sorry, what? All four women
Were prophetess.
and are being recognized as prophetess. Even though we know from Acts 2 where it starts with maid servants and male servants, all of them, yet we see them years later still acting upon that and being recognized and not told to shut up and sit in the corner. I'm just saying because when
Right.
you hear a lot of people talk about Paul,
Yes.
that's
Right.
how they address him.
And that's
yet
it.
he's
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think the way they saw women back then was probably very different than
Oh, absolutely.
what it morphed into after
Absolutely.
reading Paul's letters.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? I mean, a woman would very much be under the headship of her husband or father, but still be very effective in the kingdom.
right.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah.
They can go hand in hand.
Right.
Oh, I do want to say this. It is believed that two of the daughters eventually remained celibate and continued on with their prophetic words, and two of the daughters married.
Okay.
And had children. All right. So let's go on and in 10. And as we were staying many days, a certain man named Hagab came down from Yehuda. Now this is Agabus. And you might remember him from Acts 11:28.
Okay.
He is the one that prophesied to Paul and I can't remember Barnabas,
Okay.
who was with him about the famine that was coming.
Oh, yes.
And that's
okay.
when they gathered up all the goods and took it
Yeah,
to Jerusalem.
right,
This
right,
is the
okay.
same guy. So it doesn't say whether Paul called for him. Maybe the women were prophesying to him about not going to Jerusalem, and he's like, I don't know, let me call for this guy.
Second opinion. Fifth opinion.
Fifth opinion. Or if he just showed up, because that's what they do. They travel a
Right,
lot.
exactly.
And like you were
And I
saying,
can see
you
the
could
Lord
just show up
just sending
someone.
them. Yeah.
Yes, almost as a witness to this. All right, so, and having come to us, he took the girdle of Paul, bound his own hands and feet, and said, Thus says the set-apart Spirit, Thus shall the Yehudim in Jerusalem bind the man who owns this girdle and deliver him into the hands of the nations. All right, now this is the third prophetic word about this, about not going to Jerusalem.
2 or 3 witnesses.
Yes, but here is what's interesting. So the next thing that it says in 12, it says, And when we heard this, both we and those from the place begged him not to go up to Jerusalem. So you have these godly people saying, don't go to Jerusalem because the Lord's showing me this is going to happen. And over and over and over, Paul sees this.
Right.
Yet, what does he say in 13? It says, And Paul answered, What do you mean by weeping and breaking my heart? For I am ready not only to be bound, but also to die in Jerusalem for the name of the Master Yeshua. And as he could not be persuaded, we cease saying, let the desire of the master be done. So he says earlier, I think in 20, or maybe I read it in 21, I can't remember, but he says, look, I am persuaded by my spirit to go to Jerusalem. I have to go to Jerusalem.
Right.
But yet he's getting all these prophetic words of
Don't go.
don't go, not don't go, but here's what's going to happen.
Got you.
When you go to Jerusalem, this is going to happen. So I would propose that he's being given this word the same way Yeshua gave the word to the disciples about what was going to happen to him in Jerusalem. Not to prevent it from happening, but to strengthen those that are with them so when it does happen, they don't lose faith.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Because all of this was given to these other people saying, here's what's going to happen to Paul.
Right.
They're the ones that opened their mouth and said, here's what's going to happen to you. Don't go. They added the don't go. Just like Peter said, may this not be.
Yeah, Matthew
and Yeshua
16.
said, get behind
me,
me, Satan. So Paul was much nicer about, no, I'm kidding. So while Paul didn't say, get behind me, Satan, he said, you guys are breaking my heart because I've already resided in myself that these things are going to happen and I'm ready to die. They're just not ready to lose him.
Right.
And think of what we've gone through in the past few chapters of how rocky and shaky everything is between the Jews and the Gentiles, with the Gentiles coming in, and Paul being that solid rock that is the unwavering, no, this is how it is.
Right.
So if something happens to Paul, which it does, which we're going to see, then what's going to happen to his disciples that have been following him? Are they going to lose hope? No, but how much more so can you follow someone when you know the Lord had that happen to them?
And, I'm sure part of the teaching is, Paul even says this, I think in Romans, not me, not Apollos, but Yeshua. He's the one that teaches. Let him so that he's
saying,
Yeshua's
really the one telling me to go.
Right, I'm sure he really emphasized that. But you're right. Guy, you got to really be okay with who your real God is to be able to say that happened. Well, John the Baptist is the same. Look at all the apostles of John the Baptist.
Yeah.
And then he got beheaded.
Yeah.
But he served God, so kind of same thing.
But how many times do we feel like the Lord is telling us to do something, and then you have all these prophetic words that come at you? Okay, well, if you do, these bad things are going to happen. I think of this. How many times have you and us gone to Israel or planned a trip to Israel, and people come out of the woodwork going, I had a dream and God said not to go, or I don't think you should go, or it's dangerous, and there's all of these things, but you know in your spirit, I have to go.
Right.
I have to go. Because what it does, you have no idea what a testimony it is to the people of Israel when you show up there knowing it's dangerous.
Right.
And you say, no, I'm sorry, but my God, I want to be where my God, is. And what a testimony that is to them.
Yeah.
And
missile may go off back there, and then later it's a great story.
Exactly. And later you just tell people, wow, it was unreal what was taking place over there. And God, do we trust God or do we not? Right. That's really what it boils down to. And Paul had to say, I trust God, even if I lose my life. Who cares? Right. I've been preaching, how many people saying, lay down your life. Yeshua laid down his life. Yeah. What better place than in Jerusalem where my master laid down his life than I get to?
How about walk in his ways?
Yeah, that's what Paul's going to do. So anyway, we're going to stop right there. And next week, we're going to see what happens to Paul when he shows up in Jerusalem.
Okay.
All right. I don't know how far we'll get, but we'll see. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll see you next time. Shalom.